How's it going, everyone? Tim Kreitz here. We're going to talk a little bit about ginger beer today. There are several pretty good recipes for ginger beer out there on YouTube in particular, and I've done a variation on one of those that I want to kind of talk to you about today. It's something different, maybe something you've never quite seen before. That's always the challenge with making YouTube videos, is doing something nobody else has done or nobody else has seen. So I'm going to give you a variation on a ginger beer recipe today that's maybe something a little different than you're used to, or different than what you've had before if you're into craft beer or making beer at home. So stick around. You know, the thing about ginger beer is that it's sort of the potato salad of the homebrew world. Everyone has their own way of doing it, and they're convinced that their way is the best way, and I'm no exception to that. Everyone has their own opinion on how much alcohol it should have, how much ginger it should have, which is maybe the most important aspect of the entire argument, mainly because ginger can be very overpowering. We're going to talk about how I make my ginger beer today. My ginger beer is an ultra session ginger beer, and I'm just going to get my church key going here and open a bottle of it up and kind of show you what it looks like. It's very, very light. It's about 3% or maybe a little less alcohol, and it's got plenty of carbonation and plenty of ginger flavor without being overpowering and without being hot or disturbing in that way. I like spicy, but when it comes to ginger beer, I like it to be an easy drinker, but with plenty of ginger flavor and an overall balanced recipe that still allows you to taste the malt. But before we do anything else, I'm going to take a drink of this. And it's absolutely delicious beer. It's very, very crisp. It's best served as cold as you can get it. I like to serve it around the 38, 39 degree range. There are a lot of recipes out there on how to make ginger beer on YouTube in particular. And as I said in the introduction, I didn't want to do the same thing someone else had already done. So I'm going to spare you all of the minutia of this is how you make an all-grain beer, and this is how you ferment an all-grain beer, and blah, blah, blah. It's been done to death on YouTube. I'm going to assume that you guys who are watching already know how to brew beer. You know how to at least do mini mashes or extracts, if not having done all grain beer yourselves. And I'm going to talk to you as if you're that crowd. The first thing that I did was I started with a 2-row base that had a little bit of crystal 10 in it. So a little 10 Lovibond crystal malt added to, it's specifically Canadian 2-row malt. And the total weight, I think, came out to about 6.5 or 7 pounds altogether. And I did a brew in a bag method. So for those of you who are not familiar with brew in a bag, it's basically a no sparge brewing method. You grist your grain into a grain bag that's already in your boil kettle, do a regular mash, and then when it's time to boil after you've reached your saccharification, you basically just pull the bag of grain, and then from there it's just a regular brew day. One thing about this ginger beer in particular is that it has no hops. I figured that the ginger already had its own thing going on, and I didn't want to conflict with that. And so basically this is honey, fresh ginger, Canadian 2-row, crystal malt, yeast, and water. I started with my 2-row and crystal 10 mash, which came out to about a 1036, 1037 mash. And from there, I basically just boiled it with 2 medium-sized ginger roots, about maybe the size of an open palm, about the size of your hand. You could use 1.5 to 2 of those depending on how much ginger flavor you like. Also, it's a 30-minute boil. There are no hops, and so there's really no reason to do an hour or 90-minute boil. After about 30 minutes, you've boiled your all-grain mash, or your all-grain wort enough that you're not going to have any of the problems associated with a short boil. but you don't have to worry about hop utilization or bittering, so there's really no reason to stretch that out to an hour. At about 15 minutes before the end of the boil, I added 16 ounces of Texas wildflower honey. You would use whatever local honey you can find. I'm out here in West Texas. We don't have any local honey because the only thing that grows out here is sadness and oil wells. But you can get out here good honeys that are brought in from the hill country and elsewhere in Texas where it's not a dry, arid desert. So that's what I used, and I added that in, as I said, about 15 minutes before the end of the boil. The yeast that I used was San Diego super yeast, and you can get that from any of your online homebrew places, Northern Brewer, Austin Homebrew. Those are the two that I use the most frequently, and they all have it. I did a 750 milliliter starter, and that's basically how I did it. I poured all the ginger into the fermenter, which stayed with the beer throughout the primary fermentation, which was about 9 days. And then after 9 days, I went ahead and racked the beer to a keg, and of course leaving the ginger behind at that point, leaving it in the fermenter, and racked it to a keg, carbonated it, and started to drink it. And the end result is some really great ginger beer that is light and crisp and not overpowering in any way, and a great beer for spring and summer. Cheers, and let me know how yours goes.